Welcome to the Reduce CyberRisk Podcast, episode 77, Understanding Investigation Aspects for the CISSP Exam. Welcome to the Reduce CyberRisk Podcast, where we provide you the training and tools you need to pass the CISSP Exam while enhancing your cybersecurity career. Hi, my name is Shon Gerber, and I'm your host for this action-packed, informative podcast. Join me each week as I provide the information you need to grow your cybersecurity knowledge so that you're better prepared to pass the CISSP exam. All right, let's get going. All right, so this is CISSP training at ShonGerber.com 7.2. We're going to be dealing with the 4 types of investigations that you need to know for the CISSP exam. This comes out of Objective 7.2 from the test. So this will help cover that directly. But a lot of these things that I mentioned earlier will also feed into this. So again, they're all very. It's a harmonious harmonious band of circular goodness. Yes, that's it. That's the circular band of goodness. I can't. My English is not good. All right, administrative investigations. There's some different investigations you need to consider. And there's 3 different types of investigations. You have your administrative, you have your criminal, and you have your civil. Now, you can run into a criminal investigation that would turn into a civil investigation as well. But at the end of the day, the criminal one's the bad one. I mean, they're all bad, but the administrative investigations and civil investigations could mean some time in, you have to deal with possibly jail time for these individuals that might be stealing your stuff. Just kind of depends, but more of that runs into, what are you going to do from your internal standpoint versus what are you going to do with third parties working on stuff. So bottom line is administrative investigations they're an internal investigation. And usually if the findings out of something like this, someone will get fired if they did something bad, or they may end up getting something set up where they're fired and then follow on with a civil investigation of them. So those are things to consider around that. Usually what an internal investigation will be, their operational usage will be a violation of your policies. This would be like bandwidth usage spikes, which I don't think anybody's going to be a super administrative investigation around this, except unless they're using maybe their devices for crypto mining. Then you're using a lot of bandwidth for something like that. But I don't even know if people do much crypto mining anymore. But employees will use the devices for different aspects. And if they use those devices that are outside of the policies defined by the organization, they could have an administrative investigation and then be let go. Another one would be where they take a USB stick or business critical information and they email it outbound or put it on the USB stick and try to get it out of the building. That would be an administrative investigation. Now, typically those kick off usually about 2 weeks prior to the person leaving if you have a good idea. Sometimes, if you're lucky, sometimes those actually happen like you learn about those right when the guy or gal is leaving the building. So those are aspects that you need to be aware of. If a person can get ahead of those would actually help out a lot in the event of potential sensitive data leaving your organization. But it may require significant evidence as it relates to employees, so you have to keep that in mind. In many cases, I've seen where people just will fire people and they won't even worry about digging into this because they just know it's going to take up too much time unless it is very egregious. And so therefore that's something to consider. And it usually is the most lenient of all the standards out there. The second thing is a criminal investigation. This is typically with law enforcement and that charges a suspect with a potential crime. Now, it comes into the situation where somebody, I know of a situation, it was probably about 4 years ago. I know of a gentleman that had worked for a company, decided to kind of cause some issues, and he was really disgruntled about leaving. And so he's an IT guy. An IT guy then turned around and set up his servers to more or less nuke themselves. And then he also set up a back door. And this back door, he would then log in from home and he would nuke the computers from home. That was bad, right? And so the company went after him from a legal standpoint. And in the process of doing so, they found a guilty plea with the gentleman. And now he is breaking big rocks into little rocks. So that wasn't a good option for him. Bad idea, just a really bad idea. But again, those can cause significant issues. They can have a significant amount of back end of that, from jail time to paying a fine. So there's all kinds of issues that will roll into that. And again, though, it must be beyond the reasonable doubt for that point of it. You can't just say, yeah, I think Bill is like doing something bad, and Bill's not doing anything bad, so I just think he's doing bad. But no, it's not. You got to have it beyond a reasonable doubt. And so it must follow a very strict evidence collection piece. Okay, civil investigations, they typically do not involve law enforcement. They're like your employees or third parties will be working to build a legal case in this situation. And what will happen is someone will do something bad. Let's just say it's an administrative aspect of it. Like I mentioned at the beginning, where Bill is doing too much, he's using crypto mining and used all of your systems, like all 3,000 of your systems. And everybody's been doing crypto mining. So he's got like gobs of Bitcoin just waiting for him. The thing is he did that for months before anybody could really figure out what was going on. Well, let's say that the overall cost they figure of that, cleaning it up, using the resources it was using, so on and so forth, that cost was around, I don't know, let's just say it's $50,000 to do all that, including bandwidth, everything else. So now, as from an administrative point of view, you're going after Bill, the crypto miner dude, who's really smart by doing that, but really stupid for getting caught. You're going to give him $50,000. You're charging him for $50,000 to offset your resource and your costs. And so, therefore, this goes to a civil investigation, and they begin all this. And this typically does not have to have beyond a reasonable doubt. But I will say it depends on where you do this at, and depends on where you file it at. There are restrictions around where you file these kind of investigations, or I should say these lawsuits against them. But if you are dealing with someone in the EU versus dealing with somebody in Georgia, they are very different as far as what your potential outcome could be. So you just got to be prepared for that. Again, bottom line is that's the blue collar aspect of this. This is where you may go break some big rocks into little rocks, maybe, but highly unlikely. Mostly usually ends up happening because law enforcement's not involved. Is you will just pay a fine. You will owe. There'll be a judgment against you from the judge, and then you'll have to pay something. Typically, they wouldn't move you into the criminal aspect unless under the civil investigation they realize that there was some sort of criminal activity that was being uncovered. Then that would potentially roll into a criminal investigation at that time. So you don't know how that's going to play out, but those are the three types of investigations. Lastly is, I shouldn't say those are three. There was four. I forgot. There was a regulatory investigation. Now, this is where it comes into, this is where the government comes in and could potentially actually turn around and put another civil or criminal investigation against you. But this is where the government comes in from the standpoint of the EPA, OSHA. Depending on what country you're in, they may have their own, well, they probably do have their own type of regulatory guidance around this. So like the EPA is the Environment Protection Agency here in the United States. I'm sure the country in which you're listening has a very similar type of regulatory requirement. So you may want to keep that in mind. But when it comes to taking the CISSP exam, they're going to ask you those key pieces around who are those. And those will vary in scope and procedures depending on how bad it could be. It also could be just a situation where, like in the case of the United States, you have PCI DSS, which is your payment card industry data security standards. There may be an assessment from how are you doing in those states or those situations, and there could be regulatory requirements that come in on that. You may be required to submit an assessment or an audit, and then failure to do so will result in fines or sanctions. And again, if you do something really bad, like you're automatically releasing bad stuff into the atmosphere, and the regulatory investigation pulls up a criminal investigation, well, then you could be breaking big rocks into little rocks. So it just depends on the situation. So again, there are four types of those. There's a administrative investigation, criminal investigation, civil investigation, and then I forgot, but yes, the regulatory investigation. All right, so the last piece of our podcast today is going to be around the CISSP questions. All right, so question number one. When conducting an incident investigation within an organization, what are some key items to keep in mind before starting? A, assemble the team with the best skill sets to meet objectives. B, operate under your incident response process. C, define specific rules of engagement around law enforcement, interviewing employees, etc. Or D, all of the above. And the answer is, I bet you can figure it out, it is D, all of the above. Assembling your teams, operating under your incident response process, and define ROEs, rules of engagement, are critical when dealing with, you're dealing with an investigation. Number 2, what are the three options used for gathering evidence for an investigation? A, voluntary subpoena or search warrant, or voluntary surrender, I should say. B, involuntary surrender, subpoena, or search warrant. C, voluntary surrender, search and seizure, or warrant. And D, involuntary surrender, search and seizure, and warrant. Okay, so what are they? What are the three options? Voluntary surrender, subpoena, search warrant. B is involuntary surrender, subpoena, search warrant. C is voluntary surrender, search and seizure, warrant. And D, involuntary surrender, search and seizure, warrant. All right, so if you go through that, what does it look like? Well, there's a lot of them that look the same, but at the end of the day, it is A. When gathering evidence, there are three legal options available to gain access to evidence: voluntary surrender, subpoena, and a search warrant. Number 3, and the final one. What is the following steps that will not be included within the change management process? Okay, 1 is immediate change. If leadership wants to change to occur, that's number 3. That's A. 3A. 3B, a change request. C, rollback plan for the change. D, documenting the change. What are the following steps will not be included within the change management process? A, immediate change if leadership wants the change to occur. C, a change request. C, that was B, sorry. C, rollback plan for the change. And D, documenting the change. And the answer is A, implement change. There are situations where emergency changes need to occur, but it should be an emergency and not to desire the individual just to make the change. It's an immediate change, right? All right, I hope you enjoyed this podcast from ShonGerber.com, and I hope you have a wonderful day. And you just go ahead, you can go to ShonGerber.com, and you can get access to this podcast on Reduce Cyber Risk, and you can go ahead and get access to my CISSP mini course is there as well. And coming up soon, there will be a course for just my podcast listeners, so it's going to be awesome. So I hope you all have a wonderful day, and we'll catch you on the flip side. See ya. Thanks so much for joining me today on my podcast. Head over to ShonGerber.com and look at all the free content that I have available for you. There is a CISSP mini course, free CISSP exam questions, podcast, and so much more. It's all available to my email subscribers, so sign up. If you want my personalized CISSP training, purchase my training courses, and I'll be there to help you with your CISSP needs so you can pass the test the first time. Thanks so much for listening. We'll catch you on the flip side. See ya.